I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. We sing this song today because the question that guides our worship here today, do I or do we have enough, is one that can stir fear in our hearts and anxiety in our minds. Do I have enough to keep up with my peers? Do I have enough to survive and thrive as a young person starting out on my own? Do I have enough to support my children and give them all of the opportunities that I wish for them? Do I have enough to pay the bills this month? Do I have enough to live a good life and share generously with others? Do I have enough to retire? Do I have enough to pass on to my family and organizations I care about when I die? I know I have asked myself many of these, and I know you have too. These are questions that sometimes keep us up at night. They are important questions, and none of them have one right answer. As you heard in the story earlier that Daniel and I told, that Jesus' disciples asked themselves this question too. They worried that there was not enough food to feed the crowd of 5,000 that had gathered. The disciple Philip said that there was no way that the money they have would buy bread for that many. But then another pointed out that there was this young boy who had 5 loaves and 2 fish to offer. But what good was that with so many mouths to feed? Some might have given up and said, well, we don't have enough money or bread to feed the crowd, so I guess we'd better focus on ourselves. But Jesus had another idea. He blessed the food and gave thanks and then distributed it among the crowd. All were satisfied, and there was even some left over. Was this a miracle? Some say it was. Another interpretation is that the young boy's offer of generosity and love and Jesus' sense of abundance inspired others in the crowd to share what they had. And then there was enough. Do we have enough is a question that spans millennia, but one difference between Jesus' time and ours is that there were no billionaires in the first century Middle East. A 2017 report from Oxfam, the worldwide organization focused on poverty and hunger, said that 42 of the richest people in the world in 2017 held as much wealth as 3.7 billion of the poorest people in the world. In 2018, this number dropped to 26. 26 of the wealthiest people in the world owned as much as the 3.8 billion poorest people, and the gap widens. The world now has over 2,000 billionaires whose collective wealth is enough to end extreme poverty 7 times over. Let those numbers sink in. When we live in David Foster Wallace's pointed words as lords of our tiny skull-sized kingdoms alone at the center of all creation, it is natural to fret about not having enough. When we see ourselves as not alone at the center of creation, but rather a part of creation, it shifts our sense of what is enough. I know that I am not sustained by myself alone. I've been reminded of this again and again by family and church and my community of friends who step in to help when it feels like there's never enough money or time or inspiration or sleep. The earth and human communities sustain me with their abundance. I am inextricably connected to and part of the web of all life. And because of this, focusing on whether I have enough by looking purely at my assets of various kinds is too narrow of a focus. If everyone fully realized their part in the larger whole and lived as if they were connected to it, the world would look very different. And life would be radically different for those currently living in the most dire poverty. Disaster and devastation like that wreaked by last Sunday's tornadoes bring about this shift in our sense of enough. The cruel, unpredictable nature of tornadoes is such that your house may have minor structural damage and no electricity, and your neighbor 2 or 3 houses down may have lost their house entirely. You could say, oh, thank God I was spared, and move on with life. But instead, this disaster is bringing neighbors together with the knowledge that it could have been me. Neighbors are helping neighbors clean up and are offering shelter and support of all kinds. As a Unitarian Universalist child and youth, I learned to sing, "From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, from this we live." Has anybody sung that song before? It's familiar to a few of you. Probably if you've worked with kids at all, you've heard it. When I sing these words by Rabbis Joseph and Nathan Siegel, I'm reminded that healing and wholeness are a collective endeavor. As Unitarian Universalists, we know that salvation is not only an individual process, nor is it a judgment handed down from God above. We have a part in it. Our own salvation, the building of love and justice and wholeness in our lives, depends on us and on the collective of which we're a part. The choices that we make about how we use our resources, including our own precious lives, have a bearing on this as well. I could choose to prioritize the well-being of me and mine, but when I prioritize the collective well-being, I benefit as well. Our answer to the question, do I have enough, depends in large part on how we define enough and what values guide us. Kurt Vonnegut's poem, Joe Heller, about the author of the novel Catch-22, describes a party that Heller and Vonnegut attended at a billionaire's home. Can you imagine the scene? Both are fairly well-known writers, but they're far from being billionaires. They're likely somewhat uncomfortable, wondering if they really belong there. Vonnegut turns to Heller and asks, "How does it make you feel to know that our host only yesterday may have made more money than your novel Catch-22 has earned in its entire history?" Heller responds that he has something their host does not have: the knowledge that I've got enough. Vonnegut's poem speaks to a choice I think we've all faced at some point in our lives. We can decide that we are satisfied with and grateful for what we have, or we can situate ourselves in the never-ending pursuit for more. Do we have enough, or is what we have never enough? We can answer this question by comparing ourselves to others. We can also answer this question by discerning carefully what our guiding values are and measuring our sense of enough against those. Now, the never enough approach has led to innovation and scientific progress and amazing expressions of creativity, but it has a shadow side as well. Our answer to the question, do I have enough, also depends on what we worship. Everybody worships, David Foster Wallace says. The only choice we get is what to worship. Do you worship things that will eat you alive with fear and things that keep you trapped in the not there yet? Or do you worship things that will set you free, unfurl the wings of your soul, and give you a sense of purpose and connectedness to something vast and wonderful? The freedom that Foster Wallace is calling his young listeners and us to seek is a freedom that involves being able to truly care about other people and to sacrifice them for them in little ways every day. What we worship shapes who we are and how we are in the world and drives the choices and the sacrifices we make. Therefore, it behooves us to be conscious of what we worship. David Foster Wallace reminded these college students of that, but Unitarian minister and transcendentalist Ralph Waldo Emerson made this point in the 19th century as well. Emerson said, "A person will worship something, have no doubt about that. We may think our tribute is paid in secret in the dark recesses of our hearts, but it will come out. That which dominates our imaginations and our thoughts will determine our lives and our character." When we gather here to worship together, it helps us keep our values and our highest aspirations in front of us and present in our consciousness. We come together to remind ourselves, to orient our attention toward, and to commit our hearts to what matters most, and to what is of greatest worth in our lives beyond any material wealth. We call this God love, generosity, compassion, justice. These are the gods we worship, and these are the values that shape how we are together here. Love, generosity, compassion, and justice do, in a way, help pay the bills. They help carry us through wealth and want. They bind us to a larger whole that sustains us. And they are the foundation of knowing we have enough. I wish you enough, writes the poet Marissa Donnelly. I wish you enough loss so that you may never take what you have for granted. I wish you enough gain so that you are both humble and thankful. I wish you enough stability so that you trust the world around you and the people in it, and enough change so that you are always growing. I wish you enough love, enough life, enough purpose, enough brokenness, enough wholeness, so that your life is imperfect and beautiful and blessed. I do not wish you flawlessness or perfection. I wish you a life worth living, a life with ups and downs, trials and triumphs, growth and beginnings and endings and lessons and love. I wish you enough, just enough. Now, if you truly don't have enough, this community of love and compassion can help. And if you do have enough, you have the opportunity to offer up the gifts that you have to the greater good. Humble and thankful. We close this worship by singing a song of gratitude for what we have, for what we can give, and for the abundance that exists when we come together. Because whatever we can share is enough. May it be so. Amen.